to take the honourable gentleman's point of order, but the next group is on devolved legislature, so he is eating into the time that is actually for the minority parties to debate. But Alex Salmond. Thank you,
Madam Deputy Chair. There is no challenge to the Chair in any of these points of order. The honourable members are entitled to point out that this programme motion is railroading debate on the biggest constitutional decision facing this country for 50 years. Now, the Chairman's panel have no alternative but to follow the programme motion, but honourable members are entitled to challenge that programme motion.
Order. This is not about the programme motion on which the House voted. That was not a decision that was taken by the chairs. Now, I think we should move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I simply want to seek a clarification on something you just said a moment ago, which was about the selection of the lead amendment in each case to vote on. Is it the case, therefore, that in all of the groups we're going to go through over the next 3 days, that only the lead amendment will be voted on? Because I think that would be of great concern to all members of the House.
It's absolutely not the case. It may be, but it's not necessarily the case. In this group, we decided that only the lead amendment would be divided on. Can we move on now? Vice Chairman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, just on that last point, we have to answer to our constituents, and many of our constituents will not understand tonight that many of the amendments that have been put that they are deeply interested in have been chosen in a not very open democratic manner.
To move on now. That again is not a point of order. It was a decision of the chair. It was a difficult decision. I understand members' frustration, but I think the points have been made, and I think we really need to move on. We continue with new clause 4 on page 21 of the amendment paper, with which it will be convenient to debate the new clauses and amendments listed on the selection paper. Jenny Chapman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to speak first of all to new clause 4 tabled in my name and the names of my honourable and right honourable friends. New clause 4 requires the government to consult and take into account the views of a joint ministerial committee at intervals of no less than 2 months and before signing any agreements with the European Union. And the Labour Party, Ms Engels, is trying to be reasonable in this amendment. We don't want to block Brexit, and what we want to do is to make sure that the government does Brexit well. This amendment or new clause is very simple, and I think it is very sensible. Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales must be included and taken account of throughout the process by which the UK government negotiates our terms of withdrawal from the European Union. And equally importantly, the framework for our future relationship with the EU. New clause 4 places the Joint Ministerial Committee on a statutory footing. The committee includes the Prime Minister, Ministers of the Crown, the First Minister of Scotland and an additional representative, the First Minister of Wales and an additional representative, the First Minister of Northern Ireland and their deputy, and a further representative of Northern Ireland. The Labour Party is committed to enabling the devolved administrations to have their voices heard in this debate. Amendment 91, tabled in the name of the Honourable Member for Nottingham East, I will give way, proposes that in addition the London Mayor should be consulted, and Labour would of course support this position too. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I thank her for giving way. She said there about letting voices be heard. Her party's position on the second reading was that it would vote for the second reading of Article 50 so that the Labour Party could come forward with amendments. These amendments in the last round have just been defeated. If all the amendments are defeated, is Labour sticking to the line that if their amendments get defeated, they'll still walk through the lobbies with the Tories in the third readings?
The Honourable Gentleman is incredibly defeatist. We intend to win our amendments, Ms Engels. We are not here anticipate defeat. We have very sensible, very reasonable requests of the government, and we would expect them to accept our amendments. But as I continue, the Supreme Court decided unanimously in the Miller case that the devolved legislatures do not have a legal power to block the government from triggering Article 50. But that does not mean that devolved legislatures can be ignored. A veto does not exist, but it's only right that the Scottish Parliament and the assemblies in Northern Ireland and Wales are respected, and that the different desires, concerns, aspirations and needs of the devolved administrations are taken fully into account. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the Shadow Minister for giving way. The Shadow Minister will know that on the white paper, the Northern Ireland First Deputy First Minister are mentioned, and stated very, very clearly. The Shadow Minister will know that on the white paper, the Northern Ireland First Deputy First Minister are mentioned, and stated very, very clearly that they will be given the right to be consulted. Why does this need to be in legislation?
I have anticipated, actually, that intervention from the honourable gentleman, consistent as he is in raising these points. And if he'll forgive me, I will turn to that when it comes later in my speech. I give way.
Very grateful, Honourable Lady. Before she moves on, could she just tell the House, if the government wishes to proceed with Article 50, and the position of the SNP is that they don't wish to proceed with it, and that's the position of the Scottish Government, how is the government meant to take this into account? If you take into account the opposing view, what happens?
Well, I agree. You know, it is difficult, and our amendment, it's difficult. I don't think it's funny, but it's difficult. Our amendment doesn't require consensus, and if he reads it carefully, he will see that it's been very, very carefully worded. But just because consensus isn't easy doesn't mean that you shouldn't at least try. And that, I give way to Member.
But isn't there a bigger issue here, which is that many of the areas which have heretofore been the responsibility of the European Union are areas which are entirely devolved within the United Kingdom, for instance on agriculture or environmental protection. And there is no way that the government will be able to proceed effectively with a deal on behalf of the United Kingdom unless it has managed to take the devolved assemblies and parliaments with it.
Well, of course that's right, and that is the spirit in which we table this amendment, and we hope the spirit in which the government may concede to accepting our amendment. I've given it away a few times, if I can just make a little bit of progress, and then I will be happy to give way again in a minute. It is true, as the honourable gentleman over there said, that consensus might not be possible, although it is deeply desirable, and I would say it's probably in the national interest. Competing priorities may ultimately prevent consensus being achieved, but we really ought to try. The government... Oh, go on, I give way.
Thank the Honourable Lady for giving way on this issue of consensus. But isn't the truth that she knows, we know, the whole House knows that the Scottish National Party have no interest and no desire to reach consensus on this point? She knew that before tabling this amendment. So people, members on this side of the House will be asking, surely this is just a wrecking amendment?
The honourable gentleman needs to read the amendment a bit more carefully, because it clearly isn't a wrecking amendment. There's nothing that it desires that cannot be achieved. And just because there can't be consensus, perhaps, although we haven't even tried, it doesn't mean that the interests of the people of Scotland ought to be ignored. I'm going to give way. I'm spoilt for choice. I'm going to give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. She's making a very strong speech. I clearly support the amendment that's been put forward by the front bench on putting this on a statutory footing. But she should not agree with me that, particularly when governments have come forward with a clear plan, as the First Minister of Wales has done, and with serious questions for the UK government, that the government must come forward with some answers to them to enable a negotiation to go forward.
completely right. And I also observe, and I'm in danger of reading my speech out before I've actually got to the bit in the speech, that in Wales they have actually tried and succeeded in coming to something close to a cross-party consensus. On the issue, I'm just going to continue on the issue of Wales. The government owes it to the people of Wales, Scotland. Alex is being helpful, I'm told. I give way to the honourable member.
I know the honourable lady, unlike the Tory benches, will have read the Scottish Government's paper released before Christmas. I can see her honourable friend nodding. But does she not also remember that the Prime Minister, on the 15th of July last year, said that she would not invoke Article 50 until there was an agreed UK position backed by the devolved administrations? Are the Tory benches saying that the Prime Minister was being anything less than truthful?
I think that that's probably an intervention that would be better aimed at the government front bench. If I could just get back to the issue of Wales, the government owes it to the people of Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland to be as accommodating as possible. For example, the financial support for deprived areas that has benefited communities for decades is now in question. Whether or not the government deals with this issue as part of the passage of this bill or not, they need to know that the Labour Party will fight hard for the grants to such areas to be secured into the future. I think I have given way quite a lot, and I would like to make a little bit more progress if that's okay. There are many people who are going to want to contribute to this. New clauses 23 and 24, proposed in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South, which would receive front bench support should he be able to test the will of the House on the matter, strengthen further the role of the Scottish Government in making them a statutory consultee, and requires the Joint Ministerial Committee to report on negotiations. Ms Engels, these are reasonable demands that the Government ought to seek to meet, and the same status should, of course, be offered to the devolved administrations in Wales and Northern Ireland. It is fair to say that the White Paper lacked substance or detail, and this is particularly true when it comes to Northern Ireland. The land border, changes to competencies, and perhaps most significant of all, the importance of ensuring continued adherence to agreements made as part of the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent agreements must be maintained by the Government. New Clause 109, tabled in my honourable friend, the member for St Helens' name, states that the Prime Minister must recommit to the Good Friday Agreement, and I can see no reason why the Government should not wish to do so, and would hope that the Minister could indicate whether or not he intends to agree to my honourable friend's amendments when he responds this evening. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the Shadow Secretary for giving away on this point. She mentions the Good Friday Agreement and the commitments in the Good Friday Agreement. But since the Good Friday Agreement was between the parties in Northern Ireland, the government at Westminster and the government in the Irish Republic, how do our discussions about Brexit have any impact upon the Good Friday Agreement?
That's right.
What we're asking for, and what the new clause 109 asks for, is certainty, and I just don't think that that is too much to ask. Ms Engels, these amendments do not seek to obstruct passage of this bill, not in the least. They are born of a view that Brexit will be better for all of the people of Britain if all communities up and down the country are properly involved. The Government shouldn't hide away from this scrutiny. The Government really ought to welcome this scrutiny. Labour isn't arguing for a veto, we're arguing for inclusion. Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales are not just another stakeholder group to be consulted. The four governments, although they're not for this purpose equals, must work together. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm grateful to the honourable lady for giving way. She speaks of veto. She'll be aware, and she mentioned this earlier on in her speech, that the Supreme Court was unanimous as regards the role of the devolved assemblies and that the decision should be taken by this place. Consultation we all agree on, but she can't possibly be speaking of veto, because if she does do that, she's challenging the decision of the Supreme Court.
I'm not going to take it personally, Ms Engels, that the honourable member wasn't listening totally clearly to the beginning of my speech. But if he would like to look again in the record, he'll find that his worries are unfounded. He also might like to read the amendment that we've tabled and find that he has nothing at all to worry about. I give way to my honourable friend.
I'm extremely grateful to Honourable Lady Gilbert, and I understand the gentleness with which she is responding to the various interventions. But can I quietly, politely, and in a modest sort of way, remind her that if you read the Good Friday Agreement in as much detail as many of us in this House have, you will see the EU is mentioned throughout it, line after line, paragraph after paragraph, and that the role of the EU in the peace process is absolutely crucial and must continue to be so.
Thank you, my honourable friend, for that. I'm going to give way, but only because I couldn't find where I was up to in my speech. But this is my last intervention.
Delighted to be able to afford the honourable lady time to find her place in her speech. But is there not a point that she should actually think about disaggregating the administrations of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, because they are all different in these discussions, particularly Scotland, and perhaps it is time, if we are genuinely to trust the SNP government in Edinburgh, for them to revisit their claim during the Brexit campaign that somehow Scotland could remain part of the EU outside the UK or join fast track into the EU, which would be one of the most shameful myths peddled by any party in this House.
I'm afraid the honourable gentleman is going to have to put his misgivings about the Scottish National Party to one side and focus on the people of Scotland, because it's their voices that we want to make sure are heard in all of this. And this is going to require, and I can see that he's going to find this difficult, I only hope the Minister doesn't find it quite so difficult, that this is going to require a genuine commitment and goodwill. And I'm sure the Minister will appreciate already, in broad terms, where the First Ministers will be coming from. But he needs to commit through these new clauses, and perhaps through bringing forth his own amendments as the bill progresses, to embedding the role of the devolved assemblies within the process. It's already been proved by the First Minister of Wales and the leader of the Welsh Nationalists, who, writing together, said, "The challenge we all face now is ensuring that as we prepare to leave the EU, we secure the best possible deal for Wales. Together, we intend to rise to that challenge." And if they can do it, if they can put party political differences aside and work together for the benefit of their country, surely the government can step up to the same challenge by accepting these amendments. This is the right way, as the Prime Minister herself has said that she would like, to strengthen and not weaken our union.